Welcome to 10 Steps to Becoming a LinkedIn All-Star. I'm Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications, and this webinar is going to, literally as it says, walk you through sort of the 10 key steps to sort of getting your profile in a situation where you're happy, you like it, and you feel comfortable in sort of the way you're appearing in LinkedIn, and hopefully we've enhanced it or optimized it in a way that people can be finding you for the things that you want to be found for. And before we, oh goodness, we've already have slides that are messing up. But before we, with regard to why we're using LinkedIn, I wanted to just sort of give a little bit of a backstory with why we use LinkedIn. And for some people, it's the oldest social media network around. So I find a lot of times we have people who say, oh, I don't do social media. And I'll say, well, are you on LinkedIn? They're like, yeah, but that's not social media. But it truly is a network. And a lot of people consider it just for professional purposes. But I'm just a big advocate of LinkedIn for people who don't even do social media, just because it's a way to, if you're looking to be found on the internet, it's a very easy, low cost, low investment, or zero cost way to be found. And LinkedIn tends to work really well with Google, so that when people are looking for you or trying to find you, if you don't have a website or you don't have, let's say, a profile on your company page or wherever it is that you might have other information about you, LinkedIn tends to be one of the #1 ways to get your information about you served up on the internet. So at a minimum, I say to people, if you don't want to be found, forget it, get off LinkedIn. But for those of you who, are worried that maybe you're about to start a company, or if only you had your website, getting your LinkedIn profile sort of, let's say, optimized and completed is the #1 easiest and fastest way to do that. And I'm sure most of you have experienced, if you're about to, I don't know, do business or work with or research somebody, you will Google them, and LinkedIn's one of those first sort of searches that shows up. So moving on, and I just want also to give a little nod to why we call, why I call this an all-star status. LinkedIn actually has its own internal measurement, as it were, or sort of different criteria that it wants people's profiles to meet before it considers an all-star status. And so it's not just me saying, oh, you need to be a LinkedIn all-star. It much more has to do with meeting some of these criteria, which I've integrated into these 10 steps of wanting to do that. So hopefully, if you carefully go through these 10 steps we talk about today, I've been on the phone working with clients where with just a few tweaks, they quickly went from sort of beginner to all-star. So it's not a big jump, but there are some criteria we want to meet in terms of getting to what's called that all-star status. And before we launch into #1, the only other thing I like to caution people about or have them sort of make is their first step before the first step is checking their privacy settings. And so when you go into LinkedIn, if you look near your account information, there's always that what we call the gear looking thing. And under that, it'll have you the option of looking at your privacy settings. And so what I like to point out is when you do that, let's see if I can get my cursor over here. When you do that, this is where you actually can take control. And I do know that there are a lot of people who worry about their privacy and what's showing and what's not showing. But the #1 thing that I make sure people check on is this section right here that says sharing profile edits. It used to be it was automatically set to yes. I think now LinkedIn's gotten a hang of it, and the automatic default is no, and you just want to make sure that's no. And what that means in terms of being set to no, it means you can be making all kinds of changes to your profile, which is what we're about to talk about, and everybody in your network isn't getting notifications that, Jane Doe changed her title, Jane Doe added this work experience. So leaving that in the no position is what you want to do. I at this point can never really see the reason why you would want to change it, but that's the first thing I tell people to do when they're working on it. But there are other areas in here when you have the opportunity to go into your privacy, and you really can control sort of how open or closed you want your profile to be in a public way, and how open or closed you want it to be, for people who are in your network. You still have a lot of of privacy options. And for those of you who are kind of just getting started or who want to use LinkedIn more as a, let's say, research tool, or this is where I say to people, you can be a lurker. A lot of times you can, in this little section right here, you can actually turn off the ability for people to see that you've looked at their profile. And so again, that gives you some privacy in terms of what you're doing in terms of your research. So there are trade-offs there. But I just like to say, explore these options into privacy before you get started to get clear on what you're sharing. Or go back in there maybe after you've got your profile up to date, and you can sort of reset it when you feel like your profile's ready or you've done the research you want to do. So without further ado, we are going to number one. My number one most important recommendation is you must have a picture in your profile. And I shamelessly throw my husband under a bus with this slide, because for the longest time he did not have a picture. And I don't say I didn't shame him into doing it, but I just wanted to actually put up here the example of what it looks like versus, you know, a profile without a picture versus a profile with a picture. And this is about networking, and this is about people. So there's at this point, if you did nothing else today and you just walked away from putting a profile picture, that's the most important. Well, to me, that's the most important thing you do, because it shows that you're taking, you know, LinkedIn seriously, and you're having some meaningful engagement here. Advice on pictures: it doesn't have to be a perfect headshot, you know, that you spent millions of dollars on, but ideally it doesn't look like a beach photo. Ideally it gives some sense of personality of you or what you do or who you are to work with. Ideally it looks like you, and it's not a picture from 20 years ago or even 5 years ago. But it's just critical. I've had people who've called me to say they were looking for, you know, help with a job search, and when I went to their LinkedIn profile and saw they didn't even have a picture there, that to me undoes all, let's say, maybe the great awesome content they would have had on their profile. So the other sort of 1A, I guess, step I would point out is on your profile there's also this what's called the cover image that you can also update as well. That is less critical to me. For those of you who are maybe in the creative space, or, you know, want to show off something, or there's something about, let's say, your company or what you do, you can take advantage of that space. But having your profile picture, which is this picture, is really key. Number two is maximizing your headline. And so in the headline tends to be right here. I can see your arrow. I'm sort of looking at two screens, but it's the thing that comes after your name. So you've got your picture, you've got your name, and this next line is called the headline. And a lot of people just just use this as their title. And if you don't sort of go in and edit this headline area, what LinkedIn will do is it will probably draw whatever title you had when you enter your experience down below. But this is a totally editable area. And I strongly recommend you take advantage of that. And what I want to say is, think about the keywords. I want to talk about keywords for just a minute in terms of what is it that you do? Are you in a particular industry? I just caution people not to use words like principal, owner, or title, because principal or owner or vice president, because that isn't going to give anybody a sense of what you do. It could be in any industry. It could be, a small business, a large business. So I've seen people get really creative here, but this is kind of one of the number one opportunities for you to tell LinkedIn what you do. And sometimes it gives you an opportunity to expound upon much more than what your job title says that you do. And for some people I know who are, let's say, multi-entrepreneurs, it gives you a chance to further explore. Maybe you've got, a volunteer gig and a part-time gig. And this gives you that opportunity to talk more about what it is that you do. And when you're out and about on LinkedIn, and when people see, a small bit of your profile, when you're maybe commenting and things, these two bits of information follow you, or these three: your picture, your name, and your headline. So I challenge you to sort of think about what would be a good description about what you do, with clear words that are kind of keywords that are in your industry. Number three is the section of your LinkedIn profile called the summary. And the summary, sometimes people don't even realize it's there because if they haven't filled it out, it's a bit of a blank. LinkedIn does a better job now of trying to walk you through all of these steps of filling out your profile and not letting you leave things empty. But a lot of people get overwhelmed and say, I can't be bothered. I'll just put my experience in. That's all there is. But when somebody comes to your profile and looks at your profile page, again, what they would see was the picture, which you don't see here, this information, and then what will be seen is typically the first 2 lines of your summary. So those first 2 lines are critical. And what I say to people, think about this as kind of in the olden golden days when we would have an objective on a resume. This isn't in third person. This is really you telling your story. What do you, if somebody has 2 seconds to get a quick overview of what you are, or what you're about, or what you're looking for, or who you help, or what you've achieved, this summary section is the place to do it. It's not your resume. And I challenge people if they have like a couple of bullet points or a couple of results-driven language. Are there specific parts of the world that you work in? Are there specific types of people that you work with? I mean, if you're in purchasing, you know, you use vendor language. I think being very clear, and again, this is an opportunity to be using those keywords. So for me, I made sure that we've got words like social media, website, content management, email, media outreach. I was very specific in terms of the areas that I can help people. And another tip that I share with people, especially let's say if you're more of a solopreneur or entrepreneur and you want people to contact you, is I make it really easy and I put contact information or how they can find out more about me in the summary. If that's too salesy for you, that's fine, but I think you've just made it really easy for any user to come in and learn about you or quickly find out the best way to learn more about you. So that is the summary of the summary. And this one takes a little bit of work in terms of crafting it, writing it. And if I didn't say so, the other thing I would say is think about writing it in first person. And so I think that's uncomfortable for some people. And I think, again, if you're used to resume speak where it's more third person, it tells a story to whoever's coming to visit your profile. Number 4, this isn't necessarily the most critical step you can take in terms of your LinkedIn profile, and it's a bit of a ninja step. So for those of you who are starting to glaze over at the mention of, you know, a URL, bear with me for just a second. But I add this one in for people who have very common last names or very common names. So I don't know if you've had the experience where you say, find Joe Smith on LinkedIn, and there are probably hundreds of Joe Smiths on LinkedIn. Even less common names. I'll mention my sister. She's Ashley Parker, and I know that when you Google or look for Ashley Parker, there are lots of Ashley Parkers. So what LinkedIn gives you the option to do is you can actually in your profile edit what we call this kind of link that is basically it's your address on LinkedIn. And so typically when you go in there, you'll see linkedin.com, your name, and some numbers. But you have the opportunity to edit that. And so you can see mine's just Nancy Sheet. I very fortunately don't have a common last name. But for people like, in my sister's case, she's a realtor, I would advocate that she would go in and edit hers and be Ashley Parker Realtor. I put an example here. This is a local guy who does video, and Matt Shea is a common name. So he went in and actually put, you know, Matt of All Media, which was kind of his tag or his handle and the name of his business. So now when you type in Matt Shea video, it quickly brings him up to the top of the profile, to the top of the search links within LinkedIn and also within Google. So it's just a way of helping you get found quicker and faster for what you're known. I'm moving on to number 5. So if we were actually in LinkedIn right now, we would be, with the exception of the distraction we just had with the URL, we're kind of moving down the steps of, you know, moving down as you were sort of viewing a proper LinkedIn profile. So the next section is called experience. And a lot of people get hung up here that this has to be completely filled out, and you have to know all these dates, and you have to have all of these words, and you have to have, everything has to be perfect. And I think my biggest takeaway for you on this experience section is it doesn't have to be all of that. I put mine up here as an example. This is all I have, in terms of my most recent professional experience. I have my title, I have the name of the company, and I have the time that I worked there. And when you're editing this within LinkedIn, it gives you all of these prompts. And it typically, as you can see, brings the most recent job or current or present job to the top, and then we'll order things below. I also point out that if you work for companies that have profiles within LinkedIn, for example, I was at Bloomberg Business Week, again, when you're entering this information, some of this information will, what they call sort of, I don't know, self-fill or will automatically fill. And I encourage people to do this because, again, you're giving very key information to LinkedIn, and by default, you're creating instant networks from your previous networks. So now, whenever I'm looking around on LinkedIn, if I look at a company and there's a former Business Week person there, LinkedIn will tell me, oh, 3 people who used to work at Business Week worked here. And the same information could possibly also, on the flip side, happen if somebody, let's say, from one of your former jobs, sees that you're there. So when you're filling out actual work experiences, if you work for sort of bigger companies, and not necessarily, it doesn't even have to be bigger. I've seen instances where people work for small companies of less than 10 people, but those companies had LinkedIn profiles themselves, and so people were able to sort of connect and have those show up. If you do include more information than this, which I encourage you to do, again, this is where it kind of feels more resume, and you might have, just literally highlights. I wouldn't waste all of the space detailing every single task that you did at these jobs, unless there's something either critical or worth noting. My fear is that if you have too much, you're going to actually lose people. And if you've done a great job in your summary, then that should have captured some of the highlights that you might otherwise, feel that you had to put here. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to go there. And there are other areas of experience as you follow your profile down in terms of you'll be encouraged to fill out your education and also volunteer experience. I find, and I just was kind of thinking about the people that were coming in to view today's webinar, I would like for people to not, to strongly put their volunteer experience in here, and again, treat it like a job. And for some people, if it really was, the kind of hours and time and skill set of a job, I even encourage people to put it in under experience and not volunteer. If it truly was something where it was 20, 30, 40 hours, just because it was an unpaid position doesn't mean that it didn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be included in experience, because I think those skills and things will be treated by others, and I don't want to wait for people to scroll to the bottom of your profile and get to volunteer to see that maybe you've spent 5 years, working a full work week with some amazing volunteer experience. All right. Hopefully the dog's not going to bark. Here we go. The next section in your profile is the skills area. And if you're just starting out in LinkedIn, this, for the most part, will be empty. And you have the opportunity to tell LinkedIn, I'd like these to be the skills that are featured on my profile. A lot of times what happens is people who maybe have looked at your profile will start what's called endorsing you for these skills. Again, LinkedIn used to be much more aggressive about getting people to endorse other people here. And so you may have had that experience like, I don't know why I'm being asked to endorse Nancy for this, or I don't know what this person has to do with this. But it's kind of an organic way to grow. But if you're just getting started, I do encourage you to take a look at this section and make sure, especially for those of you who might be making a career transition. If, let's say you've been off doing corporate finance and you're moving over into business development, there might be some skills that, you might want to be focusing more on that might not have been part of your past experience. So take a look at this section and make sure, or make sure maybe there are ones that people are endorsing you for that are less important for maybe what you want to be looking at in your future. At the top, I sort of say have at least 5 to 6 skills, and and 10 to 20 endorsements is kind of the benchmark for LinkedIn. I'm not sure that's even it's even that critical, but I think there's just an element of that LinkedIn or other people viewing your profile get a sense of yes, these are third-party credibility endorsements. Okay, 7 is sort of step 7 builds upon the endorsements. It's even kind of more important in terms of getting a real feel for who you are, and this is kind of the referral section, for LinkedIn. And so these recommendations are truly what they say. These are people recommending you on LinkedIn who have either worked with you, for you, managed you, been a project, and so these hold even more value than the endorsements. And so what I advise people to do is if you don't have recommendations and you're thinking about or interested in getting them, what I say is kind of practice the effort of giving recommendations so you know what that experience is. And there's kind of also a good karma feel about giving recommendations, and the more you're sort of out there giving and as opposed to also just receiving them. So the recommendations process can be literally, if you see in this corner, ask to be recommended. And if I clicked on that on my profile, it would say, who do you want to recommend you? And you could go there. I kind of also do it more organically and not necessarily in LinkedIn. And so if I've gotten a great review or feedback from somebody, in a testimonial or a follow-up with client work, and they will send me something, I'll say, oh my gosh, that was such a nice thing for you to say. Would you, if it's appropriate, I don't do this for everybody, but I'm just trying to give you some ideas about where this would work. Would you mind actually putting that on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn profile as a recommendation? And often people are very happy to do it. And then sometimes they've never been asked to do it. And sometimes they actually need me to tell them how to do it. So that's another reason why I actually say, if you actually practice giving recommendations, you'll know what that process feels like for somebody else. And you can see it shows up in your profile that you've actually given recommendations and you've received them. They tend to be listed in order of, the most recent one. And I think also the only other thing I would say here is, depending on who the person is, they may say, well, very specific things about something you did. And again, I think this is a great opportunity for people who are coming out of, let's say, volunteer work or are looking for career changes, that sometimes these recommendations can help start painting the picture of maybe a shift or a different direction that you want your LinkedIn profile to help you portray. All right, moving on to number 8. We are cooking with gas. So growing your connections is basically another way of, connections are what LinkedIn calls the sort of people in your network. And this is kind of where we're moving from how you fill out your profile to things that you need to be doing within LinkedIn to further enhance your actual LinkedIn profile. And so growing your connections on LinkedIn is it's probably up there in the top 2 or 3 if I had to say, once your profile's up, of ways that makes LinkedIn happy with your profile. And the goal you want to get to, and I hope none of you will gasp at this, is 500. And that kind of seems to be the benchmark, because after you hit 500, most people's, I think if you've experienced it, you'll see somebody's profile and you'll see they have 275 connections or 469. Once they reach 500, LinkedIn just says 500. And so this is definitely one of those benchmarks with LinkedIn that you just want to, because once you're to 500, it doesn't matter whether you've got 501 or 10,000. It just kind of puts you in that next status of LinkedIn connections. If you're just getting started and you have 10, that's fine. What I typically advise people to do is, on a regular basis, and we'll talk about more kind of what regular activity on LinkedIn looks like, go in and try and connect with, 5 or 10 people once a week. I wouldn't sit down and suddenly try and reach out to 500 people all in one day. It will feel spammy. it will suddenly show up on your profile that da-da-da's got a new connection and da-da-da's got a new connection, and it'll be very obvious that you're doing that. I mean, if you're a salesy person and doing 25 at a time is your comfort level, that's fine. But I also say when you're connecting on LinkedIn, I always do it in a very organic way, and by organic I mean in a natural way. I typically always say, please write some sort of a note. I don't think LinkedIn still includes this kind of standard language. It'll say a LinkedIn connection is more likely to happen if you include a note. And so they give you a blank space for including a note. And I always advocate that people include a note. And if you're just starting out, I say to people, be very honest. Say, I'm working on my LinkedIn profile and I've been told I need to work on my connections. So I'm hoping this is an opportunity to check in with you and see how you're doing. If you, let's say, have met somebody at an event or a conference or a networking opportunity, I find LinkedIn to me is the natural next step versus an email into their box if they're a LinkedIn person, because it's a way that you then have them kind of in your if you want to think of LinkedIn as your Rolodex, in your Rolodex, and it's a nice way to sort of message them and connect and start growing that LinkedIn. And I think the other thing that's not in here is some of you, I've been in a situation where people like, I have a LinkedIn profile, I haven't touched it for a year, and I've got a huge inbox of notifications saying people want to connect with me. And with that, I would typically say, parcel out some time and sit down and go through those people who've reached out to you. A lot of people use LinkedIn and want to just have a gazillion connections, and they don't care whether they know the people they're connecting with or not. That tends not to be my philosophy or approach. Again, I leave it slightly up to you in terms of what are your goals with LinkedIn and what do you want to use it for. But I tend to I really need to either know the person or know that they know enough of our mutual friends that I feel like they would be a great person to have in my network. If somebody reaches out to me and I honestly have absolutely no context while they're trying to reach out to me, at this point I kind of don't immediately connect until I can either find out more or I figure out more about what they're looking for. So that's my personal approach and philosophy. I don't, if you're more of the more the merrier, that's your approach. And if you're even more conservative and you really want to keep it close to the vest, that's also fine. I'm just letting you know kind of where LinkedIn fits in terms of that magic number of 500. Moving on to number 9. What's happened with LinkedIn, probably since Microsoft bought it, but also to sort of keep up with the feel of other social networks, is LinkedIn is now feels more like the Facebooks and the Twitters in that it actually encourages you to have articles and activities and or that you actually engage in other things that people are posting. So just like in Facebook or Twitter, there is now when you log into your sort of homepage on LinkedIn, you'll see a whole stream of activity. And LinkedIn wants to reward you for, quote unquote, engaging in that activity. And by engaging, it means liking posts, it means commenting on posts, it means sharing on posts. Another opportunity that LinkedIn gives you that a lot of social media platforms don't is there's actually a publishing platform within LinkedIn where you can write articles. And so again, for those of you who are sort of baby stepping your way potentially to a website, but you're not quite committed to it, or you've got a burning desire to sort of have a longer format to sort of talk about, either your passion or your industry or your work, LinkedIn makes it really, really, really easy to sort of get your stuff published, and they do a great job of also promoting it. So again, that's under the article section, and when you're in LinkedIn, it'll say, do you want to publish an article? And so I strongly do encourage you to think about that if you're kind of not ready for bloghood, but you want to start practicing this longer form writing. And then last but not least is kind of following your interest or your groups or your industry information. And that's sort of at the bottom of your profile. This is just pulled from mine. But this is where you can follow, if you see the little blue eye, this is where, these are influencers that you can follow. These are companies you can follow, or they're groups. So book publicity and marketing, is a group of people who obviously do book publicity and marketing, and or Women in Digital is, let's say, a networking group. But filling this out as well also gives people, it's another opportunity for networking, as well as it just adds a little more flavor to your profile. So I've had an example where somebody was in manufacturing, but they were really passionate about drones and aerodynamics sort of stuff. And they were kind of in a passion group down here, and that helped them get the job because it differentiated them from people who hadn't, let's say, completed that. And so it's a way to sort of share your common interests. This also, again, helps, providing this information to LinkedIn also helps LinkedIn get more information about who you are and how to make sure that you're showing up in the right places with maybe the people you should be networking with, or potential job opportunities, or other people, that are in the same space. So I sort of encourage people not to ignore the interest section. And that is number 10. I have a couple frequently asked questions and that people tend to have. So one of them is, do I have to subscribe to LinkedIn Premium? And for those of you new to LinkedIn, is Premium is their way of getting you to pay to have added perks. And depending on what you want to do on LinkedIn, you can be a CEO who wants to have more access. You can be a person looking for a job who wants more access to sort of job opportunities. You could be a headhunter who wants more access to people's information. What I say is, if you're kind of starting out in LinkedIn and just getting your profile up, there are a million different ways to use LinkedIn and get your profile optimized and use it for your needs at the non-paid level. And so I say start there before you look into investing. Again, once you've gotten it maximized, or you want to be using LinkedIn much more aggressively, it's worth probably looking into. But at this point, if you're just starting out, I say the non-premium way to go is fine. Connecting with competitors is another question a lot of people ask. I think the day and age where, oh, I don't want people to know who I do business with. I think that's a bit of an old school way of doing business these days. But it's a fair question here, because I know with some of the small businesses, people say, oh, they're just connecting with me to get my client list. So there's not a right or wrong answer here. I think if you have a sense of who the person is, or you understand them and you really think that's all they need, then I wouldn't do it. But I think there are, in the same way that maybe you could also see their business or do research about who is in their LinkedIn list. It kind of comes down to your philosophy about social networking in general. I just think it's not a clear yes or no. And in some people it's a clear no. But for others, I think depending on your industry, it might make great sense, because your competitor today may be your sort of boss or cohort tomorrow, or vice versa. So it's kind of a up to you decision, but I just think, and also you might be able to change you could consider changing your privacy settings depending on how you decide your approach of networking goes. Getting recommendations, we talked about, and that's, asking either through the LinkedIn network or doing it kind of offline outside of LinkedIn, but then encouraging people to come in and do that. How much time should I spend on LinkedIn? I'd like to say spend some time, and by that it may be an hour or two, on covering some of the steps that we just talked about, getting your profile really, up to speed. And I'm going to tell you right now, there'll be some frustration with filling out the dates on your experience and not having it pop up like you want, or trying out a headline and then seeing that you don't like it. So there's kind of two steps to this process. One, kind of writing out what you want to be on the profile, and then the actual putting it on the profile and getting comfortable with sort of editing things in your LinkedIn profile. Once you have that sort of headline and summary and experience filled out the way you like it, I still encourage people to carve out, if at all possible, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, a kind of LinkedIn dive-in time, just to go see, to either work on building their connections and or to go in and sort of, comment or like or share other things that are going on. So just like in Facebook, if there's an interesting story in your, industry or whatever it is that you're passionate about that you want to share, you have the opportunity to do that in LinkedIn, and you'll be rewarded for that with regard to LinkedIn sort of seeing that you're an engaged profile. Getting to this all-star status is important not only because you get credit for all-star, but LinkedIn tends to serve up much more robust and active profiles in other, to other people who are searching and making it easier for connections. And the way this is a slight aside, but it's a way that I kind of test to sort of, or I tell people, you'll know that you've completed your profile well if LinkedIn starts sending you job opportunities that are very well aligned with things that you could do. And to me, that means you've got the right keywords, you've got the right titles, there's a nice mix of company, given your network. When LinkedIn starts sending to you by notifications, or email recommendations for job opportunities, and they really look to be on target for what you're interested in, that to me is kind of the big check mark of, great, my profile is putting out into the LinkedIn world the information that I want it to do, so that it's sending me back the right, people to find me, or jobs, that I might be interested in. And even for me, not looking for a full-time job, it's still a reaffirmation that I've got the right information in my profile. And how do I control who can see what on my profile? We mentioned that at the beginning. Again, going under the sort of what looks like a little gear on your profile is under the privacy and settings. There are lots of different customization modes you can go in where you can check who can see what, from your public profile, and you can have it very private and they not even see your picture, they can't see your connections, to what you want people who you are connected with to see. So I would encourage you to spend some time there so you're clear with what your privacy settings are. So now what I'd like to do, we did that in just under 40 minutes. I'm going to shift, and bear with me if I have some technological challenges. I'm going to shift out of PowerPoint, and I'd like to shift into just actually looking at LinkedIn. I'm going to unmute you guys. You can mute yourself if you want back so that people might not be hearing your dogs. But if you want to ask questions, I was going to kind of just walk through an actual LinkedIn profile and some of the things on LinkedIn for you to see if you're, watching, continuing to watch. And feel free to ask questions. If you don't feel like talking and you want to type something in the chat, you can also do that. So bear with me. We are going to new share. I'm going to move to hopefully LinkedIn. Let's see what happens. Okay. In theory, you should be seeing LinkedIn on my screen. Now I'm going to have to find my finder, my arrow. Looks like come back. Can somebody give me actually I'm going to go back. I'm going to unmute people. Okay, can somebody just give me the heads up and let me know if you are seeing my LinkedIn profile or
Yes,
LinkedIn?
ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, great. Now I just had to be able to get the cursor over here and we'd be in great shape so I can do something. Bear with me for a second. Oh, there it is. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so this is what basically, let me take a break. Deep breath. I'm just checking my questions really quickly. All right, everybody can see it. Great. Jackie had a question. If I already have a blog on my website, is it worth duplicating those articles in LinkedIn? Great question, Jackie. What I tend to say to people is, if you do that, I tend to say this article previously appeared on and put a link to your website. I wouldn't do it for every single blog post because LinkedIn doesn't care. They're happy to see your content. But Google does care, and so Google will start realizing that you're duplicating content in two places, and they're not overly keen on that. So I think if you're blogging 4 times a month or something, I would say maybe put, at least start by putting one up, maybe one a month up, and just get into the flow of doing that. If you find that you're getting a lot of traction in LinkedIn and you want to do more, that's fine. It kind of is up to you, but it's not a no-no. But some people actually tend to write in both places. So I say give it a try with 1 or 2 pieces and see what happens. You guys have kind of nicely muted yourselves, I think, but if you have specific questions, otherwise I'm going to kind of just walk through what a LinkedIn profile looks like. But if anybody's sort of stuck or I said something, I'm going to take a pause and say, please, raise your hand and let me know if there's something specific. Anyway, so what this looks like, and again, we're walking through my profile, and I hope I'm not exposing any private information, but this is sort of the home base when you come to LinkedIn. And so this is what it looks like. It says feed, but this is kind of what home looks like. I'm going to reaffirm that. So when you open up LinkedIn, it would tend to be like this. And it kind of gives you that highlight of your information on the side. And again, LinkedIn's now focused on tracking kind of activities, right? So 49 people have viewed your profile. If you click on that, it takes you through there to tell you that. And 124 views of your post. And that post could be something, an article or something that you shared. So let me see Nancy's activity. So this was something I posted. It was an interview we did last week, and 125 views. So again, LinkedIn wants to keep rewarding you for information that you are posting and sharing. And it encourages that by kind of saying this is what you've done.
Hey, Nancy.
Yep.
Is there a way to find out who those 124 people are?
I don't think well, let's just go. This is one of those examples where I can get this much information, so I can get some basics. I think this is where, Phyllis, if you paid for premium, you might be able to get more access.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I've never even seen, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, so as you can see, so this gives me some information in terms of areas that people might be coming for, as well as geographic. So interesting. Yeah. Hartford, that's kind of curious to me. I kind of know why that's Hartford, but because of some recent, activity of some people I've been talking to. So that's, really helpful to know. And typically what was interesting here is most of these views, sorry, we're going a little ninja for some people, but when we're here, I want to explain things. We're second degrees, which means most of these views were not people who knew me. They were people who knew somebody who was a first connection who didn't know me. Great question, Phyllis. I'm going to go back to a couple things. One, let's go to, this is me, view profiles, settings and privacy. So walking back through the sort of steps 1 through 3. This is that area this is information about your account, but more importantly, this privacy section is where you, like I said, look at all these different ways you can customize the information on your profile. And so again, I would go through each one of them, read them very carefully. Sometimes they have like hidden double negatives and it's not always clear. The other one we didn't talk about, but it's important because I know some people are like, I hate LinkedIn. They send me a gazillion emails and I'm fed up and I can't do it. So this again is where you can control how much you get information sent to you via email or in terms of notifications. So this initial investment of your time will probably feel a little bit heavy, or block out a couple of different chunks of time. Maybe one, to work on your profile and one to work on sort of how you get the information. So we're going to go back to LinkedIn, and I just want to sort of have you look at the profile in its whole. And I'm sorry my screen's a bit, I wish I had the bigger screen to share with you, but let's go back to view profile. And again, this is kind of being able to see the whole thing in the screen, but what I wanted to point out is one, LinkedIn's done a much better job of always trying to put this pencil here. So that means edit. So if we were going to change anything in this area, that means edit. And suddenly it'll pop up, and these are all the places where you can update this information. And here's that beautiful little summary that we talked about. And again, this is LinkedIn reminding us that your changes won't be shared with your network, which is awesome. So we didn't change anything. And you'll notice up here where it says current position, this tends to pull from the experience section below. It doesn't give you the opportunity to manipulate it. It'll just go down and look at your profile below and change that. So I'm not going to change anything. And this is what we talked about in the summary, where the first 2 lines show up in your summary. And then when you click more, you can see the rest of it. But as you can see, kind of this above the fold, if somebody has a quick cursory glance at your profile, this is all they get. They get this picture. They get that awesome headline we talked about. They get your experience. They see that I have 500 plus, and they get this 2 lines. And so in that, whatever we talk about, 0.8 seconds that you get a chance to make an impression, this is it. So that's why I sort of say some of these are the key areas to spend your time and energy, as opposed to just maybe saying, you know, vice president works at this, I don't know, I shouldn't say bank because I know they have different rules for financial institutions. But telling your story right here is really critical. The other thing I wanted to sort of point out, when we talked about changing your URL, this is where you would do it. And so this is that area where you would change that. And again, it's not critical, but that's where you would do it in terms of changing your URL. I'm going to go back. So this is what I wanted to point out to you. So on my profile, I'm seeing my dashboard. And if you were looking at your profile, you would see your dashboard. But as you can see where it says here, private to you, it doesn't, this isn't what would show up to other people. If other people were looking at your profile, it would scroll down to articles and activities. Again, let me point out, this is LinkedIn trying to get me to give them more information. You can or you don't have to, but especially if you have a very, let's say, empty profile, LinkedIn's going to keep coming at you left, right, and center to try and get you to fill out information. If you're not interested in doing it at the time, you just always clicked not now, but they'll keep trying to make sure your information is updated. Again, if somebody were looking at my profile, they would see this. This is the next thing they would see after the summary, is they would see, as I pointed out to you, articles and activity. So again, before somebody even gets to my job experience, the next thing LinkedIn serves up to them is how active and what I'm doing on the LinkedIn platform. So for people who are like, oh, my profile's fine, it's up to date, if you haven't actually been on the platform in 6 months, or you haven't, let's say, commented on anything, it's going to feel quite dated here. And it's just one thing, it's it's a new twist on the LinkedIn platform I want people to be aware of. Again, here's where the experience is. You can fill it out more. This plus button is where you would add jobs. Now I'm outing myself that I used to be an accountant. Now you guys know it. If you've stuck through for this, you now know this. Education, I basically have, again, you can go all out. If you have amazing projects, or you've had an awesome Rockstar 4.0, or you have a BB, an MBA or other graduate degrees, please fill that out here. It's very important both from the networking standpoint and getting credit for that. We talked about volunteer experience, and this again is I think it's an awesome opportunity that should be robust. And again, it is just a volunteer job, but I think for those of you who've been sort of unpaid employees, and jobs, I would actually move that experience up to experience. Other things that aren't in my profile but you might want to think about are projects, accomplishments, honors. A lot of those you can add. So see where it says add a new profile section. This is where you can add in more things, in that area in case you're not seeing that opportunity. If your profile is new, LinkedIn will prompt you to kind of fill stuff in. So here was the recommendations, and it scrolls to interests, and that's kind of the bottom of the profile. I'm happy to if anybody has specific questions about, the viewing my profile or other things, I'm happy to answer questions. If you have questions afterwards, I'd love to take the opportunity while there's a profile up. I don't really have time to go through everybody's profile here, but are there specific questions or anything that people have been stuck on, or they were unclear, or maybe that I talked about and they'd like to see how it works on the, how it works in action? I've unmuted you if I accidentally muted you, but if you want to type in something, feel free to type in something. Or if something didn't make sense, I kind of budgeted us an hour, and I typically go over, but I still have that we've got a few minutes if you want to ask specific questions.
Hey, Nancy, I have a question. This is Phyllis. Have you done or know about or have worked with anybody who's done any of the paid sort of promoting or advertising on LinkedIn?
I haven't with a company that was, we looked into it with a client that was a B2B company in terms of promoting their content. And we didn't get any further. Like, I think LinkedIn used to offer credits, and we were going to take advantage of their credits for promoting some of their content and blog posts. We didn't get that far. But in terms of using it, advertising, sort of personal in terms of making sure my profile shows up, I don't. And I don't know, Phyllis, if my understanding is that might be a perk of some of the premiums, where in having a premium, your profile tends to float to the top over, I won't say necessarily more qualified ones, but the premium sort of helps, it gives LinkedIn that incentive to serve your profile up higher and first. Or in the situation, let me see if I can get it to show up. People also viewed, like, to me, it always cracks up, the list that they put over here. And so I don't know also, again, if in the premium format you sort of say, I want to show up whenever somebody's showing up for social media in New York City. That's as far as I can answer you on that one.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? All right. I'm seeing nice notes that people are they've got their open items. I will follow up with a recording of this so you guys can sort of re-listen to it or re-see it or go through the 10 steps, and also shoot you an email. And so feel free to reply if something didn't make sense or you get stuck, or after you've updated your profile, shoot me the link and I'd love to take a look and give you a little shout out or help you if anything you get stuck on. But thank you guys so much. This is the first step. You're going to start the new year right with an updated LinkedIn profile. I'm a big fan, and I look forward to hearing if you have any other questions or follow-up. Have a great day, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of exit out of our webinar. That's it. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you guys. I'm going to get my...
Thanks, Nance.
Bye, Jax. Thank you guys. Come on.